Right now, the United States is facing one of the most dangerous and relentless winter patterns in recent history. From the frozen Midwest to the battered California coastline, the country is being hit from multiple directions. Snowstorms, atmospheric rivers, flooding rains, brutal wind chills, and historic mountain snowfall. And this is not just another winter storm. This is a chain reaction. It began quietly. Meteorologists first noticed an unusual setup in the Pacific, a powerful atmospheric river forming thousands of miles offshore. For many Americans, the term atmospheric river sounds harmless. But in reality, it is a skyborne fire hose, a concentrated stream of moisture capable of dumping months of rain in just days. And it was heading straight for California. When it made landfall, it didn't just bring rain. It brought destruction. Winds howled across coastal communities at over 70 miles per hour. Massive waves pounded the shoreline. Streets turned into rivers. Hillsides gave way under the weight of water. Entire neighborhoods in parts of Southern California faced mudslides and flash flooding. Drivers were stranded. Power lines collapsed. Emergency crews worked through the night. In the Sierra Nevada mountains, snowfall piled up so quickly that highways were buried. Some mountain towns recorded several feet of snow in less than 48 hours. Rescue teams had to dig out trapped vehicles. Roofs groaned under the crushing weight of wet snow. But California was only the beginning. As the storm system pushed eastward, it collided with Arctic air descending from Canada, and that's when things escalated. Temperatures plummeted. In parts of the Midwest, wind chills dropped below minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. In some areas, it felt like minus 30. Exposed skin could freeze in minutes. Airports began canceling flights by the hundreds. Major highways became sheets of ice. Schools shut down. Businesses closed early. Families scrambled to prepare. And as this winter blast tightened its grip, a terrifying reality emerged. This wasn't just one storm. It was a pattern, a repeating cycle of moisture from the Pacific meeting polar air from the north, creating a relentless conveyor belt of severe weather across the nation. In Northern California, rivers swelled to dangerous levels. Reservoirs, once dangerously low during drought years, suddenly filled at alarming speeds. While that may sound like good news, rapid water rise creates its own crisis. Levees were tested. Flood warnings spread. Communities near low-lying areas were told to prepare for evacuation. Meanwhile, along the coast, powerful surf-damaged piers and beachfront properties. Erosion chewed away at cliffs already weakened by previous storms. In some neighborhoods, residents woke up to find their backyards partially collapsed. Further inland, emergency shelters opened for those displaced by flooding. But the human toll extended beyond physical damage. For elderly residents living alone, freezing temperatures became life-threatening. For homeless populations in major cities, survival became a race against the cold. Utility companies struggled to keep up with widespread outages. In some regions, tens of thousands were left without electricity during freezing conditions. And then came the next system. Meteorologists warned that another atmospheric river was lining up behind the first. Back-to-back storms. No recovery window. No time to dry out. This is what makes the current crisis different. It's not a single catastrophic moment. It's the accumulation, wave after wave, system after system, each one compounding the damage of the last. In Southern California, mudslides became an increasing concern in areas previously scarred by wildfires. Burn scars lack vegetation, meaning there's nothing to hold the soil in place. When heavy rain hits those areas, the ground turns unstable almost instantly. Entire roads were closed as debris flowed downhill. Emergency alerts buzzed on phones across multiple counties. And yet, in the midst of chaos, there were also moments of resilience. Neighbors helped neighbors sandbag homes. Strangers pushed stuck cars out of flooded intersections. First responders worked 24-hour shifts. But meteorologists remain concerned because this pattern isn't random. It's connected to larger atmospheric shifts, changes in jet stream behavior, ocean temperatures, and lingering climate influences that are intensifying winter extremes. In the East Coast states, governors began preparing for their own impact. Forecast models showed snow bands stretching across thousands of miles. Ice accumulation threatened power grids. Supply chains braced for disruption. America was now facing a coast-to-coast winter event. And most dangerous part? Uncertainty. Forecast tracks shifted daily. Some areas expecting rain suddenly faced snow. Others braced for flooding instead of ice. For families trying to plan, the unpredictability added anxiety. Grocery stores saw surges in shoppers buying bottled water, batteries, and non-perishable perishable food. Gas stations filled up as drivers feared being stranded. Meanwhile, emergency management agencies issued stern warnings. Stay off roads unless absolutely necessary. But many had no choice. Healthcare workers still had to report to hospitals. Delivery drivers still had routes to complete. And as the storms intensified, the first fatalities began to be reported. Accidents on icy roads, exposure-related deaths, and storm-related injuries. Each headline carried a name. Each number represented a family changed forever. This is the reality of extreme winter weather. It doesn't just disrupt, it reshapes lives. As meteorologists track the next incoming system, one question hangs heavy over the country. How long will this pattern last? Because if the atmospheric river continues feeding into cold Arctic air, the United States may be facing one of the most prolonged and destructive winter stretches in recent memory. And California, already battered by drought, wildfire, and infrastructure strain, stands directly in the path. This is not just a weather story. It's a test of preparation, a test of infrastructure, a test of resilience. And as the clouds gather once more over the Pacific, millions are watching the radar, knowing the next wave is already forming. The science of destruction, why this keeps happening. To understand why this winter crisis feels relentless, you have to look beyond the clouds, because what's happening over California and across the United States is not random. It's atmospheric mechanics on a massive scale. High above the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the coastline, a narrow corridor of concentrated moisture begins to form. It stretches for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable on satellite imagery. This is what meteorologists call an atmospheric river, and despite the gentle name, it behaves like a weapon. An atmospheric river can carry more water vapor than the entire flow of the Mississippi River. When it reaches land, especially mountainous terrain like California, Sierra Nevada, that moisture has nowhere to go but up. And when air rises, it cools. When it cools, it condenses. And when it condenses, it pours. California's geography makes it uniquely vulnerable. The coast ranges act like a wall, squeezing rain out of incoming storms. Then the Sierra Nevada forces even more moisture upward, wringing out intense precipitation in the form of heavy rain at lower elevations and deep snow at higher altitudes. This process is called orographic lift, and during powerful atmospheric river events, it can produce staggering totals. But here's where it becomes dangerous. When one system hits, the ground absorbs what it can. Rivers swell, but they hold. Infrastructure strains, but survives. But when storms come back to back, the soil becomes saturated. Hillsides weaken. Drainage systems get overwhelmed. And suddenly, the same rainfall totals that might normally be manageable turn catastrophic. That's exactly what's happening now. California recently endured years of severe drought. The land became hardened. Vegetation thinned. Wildfires scarred massive areas of terrain. And burn land is unstable land. When fire strips away plants and roots, nothing anchors the soil. So when heavy rain falls on those burn scars, it transforms into fast-moving debris flows. Mud, rock, tree limbs, even boulders, racing downhill with terrifying speed. Entire neighborhoods built beneath hillsides suddenly find themselves at risk. And this is not hypothetical. Emergency crews have already responded to multiple mudslides triggered by intense rainfall over wildfire burn zones. Meanwhile, higher elevations are dealing with a different threat: snowpack overload. The Sierra Nevada snowpack is critical for California's water supply. In fact, much of the state relies on slow snowmelt to refill reservoirs throughout the year. But when snowfall is extreme, piling up several feet within days, it creates structural danger. Roofs collapse, trees snap underweight, roadways become impassable. And when that deep snow eventually melts quickly due to a warm system following a cold one, it can cause sudden flooding downstream. This is the delicate balance California constantly walks. Too little water, drought. Too much, too fast, disaster. But California isn't alone in this crisis. As the Pacific systems move inland, they interact with another powerful force: Arctic air. Normally, the jet stream, a high-altitude river of fast-moving air, acts like a barrier, keeping bitter polar air locked to the north. But sometimes, the jet stream weakens and dips. When that happens, frigid Arctic air plunges southward into the United States. And when warm, moisture-rich air from the Pacific collides with that cold mass, you get explosive winter storms, blizzards, ice storms, wind chills that feel like Antarctica. In parts of the Midwest and Great Plains, wind chills have already plunged below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Some areas have approached -30. At those levels, frostbite can occur in less than 15 minutes. Vehicles struggle to start. Diesel fuel gels. Water pipes freeze and burst. Energy grids face enormous strain as heating demand skyrockets. And here lies another vulnerability. Much of America's infrastructure was built for historical averages, not for extremes that push beyond previous records. Power lines are vulnerable to heavy ice accumulation. Transmission towers can fail under pressure. When outages occur during extreme cold, recovery becomes urgent and dangerous. In some regions, rolling blackouts have been discussed as a preventive measure to protect the larger grid from catastrophic failure. Air travel has also been severely impacted. When storms stretch coast to coast, aircraft can't simply reroute around them. Snow-covered runways, de-icing delays, and high winds cause cascading cancellations. And because major hub airports connect the entire nation, disruptions in one region ripple across the country. Supply chains feel it next. Trucks delayed by icy highways slow the delivery of food, fuel, and essential goods. Hospitals prepare for surges, not just weather injuries, but cold-related health emergencies, hypothermia, heart stress, respiratory complications. And while this unfolds, meteorologists are watching ocean temperatures closely because warmer ocean water fuels stronger storms. When Pacific surface temperatures run above average, atmospheric rivers can carry even more moisture. And the more moisture they carry, the heavier the rainfall, the deeper the snowfall, the greater the flood risk. Scientists have been warning for years that climate variability could intensify extreme precipitation events. Not necessarily more storms, but stronger ones. Veta-vets, whiter whites, colder outbreaks that follow warmer moisture flows. And that contrast, that violent collision of extremes, is what makes this winter especially dangerous. But here's the psychological layer most people don't talk about. Storm fatigue. When communities face repeated disasters, wildfire season, then drought, then flood, then freeze, resilience begins to thin. Financially, emotionally, mentally, insurance rates climb. Some providers withdraw coverage entirely from high-risk zones. Rebuilding becomes more expensive each year. For families living paycheck to paycheck, one flood or one prolonged outage can be devastating. And yet, the pattern shows little sign of immediate relief. Forecast models indicate that the Pacific remains active. Additional storm systems are lining up offshore. Each one has the potential to tap into that same atmospheric river pipeline. And if Arctic air remains in place across central and eastern states, the collision zone remains active. This is why meteorologists are using words like prolonged, significant, and dangerous. It's not a single dramatic moment. It's a sustained atmospheric alignment, a conveyor belt of moisture meeting a wall of cold. In California, emergency management teams are reinforcing levees and monitoring reservoir levels carefully. Water releases must be calculated. Too much and downstream communities flood. Too little and dams face pressure. In the Midwest, warming centers are opening for vulnerable populations. Salt trucks run nonstop. Highway patrols respond to spinouts and pileups. Across America, millions are checking forecasts daily because this winter is no longer predictable. It's dynamic, that it's aggressive, and it's testing every system in place. But the story isn't over yet. When we talk about winter storms, we often talk in numbers. Inches of snow, miles per hour, degrees below zero, billions in damage. But behind every number, there's a face. Behind every statistic, there's story. And as this relentless winter pattern tightens its grip on California and much of the United States, the human cost is becoming impossible to ignore. In the Sierra Nevada mountains, entire communities have been buried under historic snowfall. Residents wake up to doors sealed shut by drifts taller than they are. Cars disappear completely beneath layers of white. Snowplows work around the clock. But in some areas, the accumulation is simply too fast. Families ration food, not because there's panic, but because roads are closed. Ambulances struggle to reach remote homes. In one mountain town, emergency crews had to use snowcats to transport a patient suffering from chest pain because traditional vehicles couldn't get through. Now move south. In parts of Southern California, the threat looks completely different, but just as dangerous. Instead of snow, it's mud. After days of relentless rain, hillsides begin to move. At first, it's subtle, a crack in the driveway, a small trickle of brown water. Then suddenly, the ground gives way. Entire sections of earth slide downhill, carrying rocks, trees, and debris into neighborhoods below. Families evacuate in the middle of the night with only minutes to spare. Parents grab children. Pets are carried through pouring rain. Emergency alerts light up phones across entire counties. And when morning comes, some return to find their homes damaged beyond repair. But perhaps the most brutal impact is being felt in the Midwest and northern states, where Arctic air has turned daily life into a survival challenge. When wind chills drop below -20 or -30 degrees Fahrenheit, it is no longer about inconvenience. It becomes life-threatening that in some cities, homeless shelters reach capacity within hours. Volunteers scramble to distribute blankets and hot meals. Outreach teams search under bridges and in alleyways, urging people to come indoors before frostbite sets in. Hospitals report an increase in cold-related injuries. Frostbite cases, carbon monoxide poisoning from improper heating methods, heart complications triggered by shoveling heavy snow in sub-zero temperatures. And then there are the roads. Icy highways become silent traps. One patch of black ice is all it takes. Spinouts turn into pileups. Visibility drops to near zero during blizzard conditions. Semi-trucks jackknife across interstates. First responders risk their own safety navigating treacherous conditions to reach crash victims. Each storm wave leaves behind another list of names. And with every passing day, the economic cost continues to climb. Airlines have canceled thousands of flights nationwide. Travelers sleep on airport floors, waiting for weather windows that may not come for days. Cargo delays disrupt supply chains already under pressure. Small businesses feel it deeply. Restaurants lose revenue when customers can't travel. Construction projects stall. Retail deliveries are delayed. Hourly workers miss paychecks because workplaces shut down. In agricultural regions, livestock face exposure risk. Farmers must protect animals from extreme cold while managing feed shortages caused by transportation delays. Energy consumption surges dramatically during cold snaps. Natural gas demand spikes. Electric grid strain. In some areas, utility providers issue conservation warnings, asking residents to lower thermostats to prevent overload. Because when extreme cold and widespread storms stretch across multiple states at once, recovery resources become thin. Repair crews can't be everywhere at the same time. And then there's insurance. For homeowners in flood-prone or wildfire-scarred regions of California, insurance premiums have already been rising. Some providers have reduced coverage in high-risk zones. After repeated disasters, fire, then flood, then storm, rebuilding becomes not just emotionally exhausting, but financially overwhelming. Some families face impossible choices: repair and stay, or relocate entirely. And yet, in the midst of hardship, something powerful emerges. Community. Neighbors helping neighbors dig out driveways. Strangers offering generators to those without power. Local businesses donating supplies to shelters. First responders working double and triple shifts without complaint. Across the country, stories of resilience are unfolding quietly alongside the destruction. In one Midwestern town, residents formed volunteer teams to check on elderly neighbors during the coldest nights. In California, community groups organized sandbag distribution centers before the heaviest rainfall even arrived. Preparedness is improving, but so is the intensity of the storms. Meteorologists warn that repeated freeze-thaw cycles could worsen infrastructure damage in the coming days. Roads crack, water mains burst, bridges weaken under stress, and the psychological toll cannot be measured in inches or dollars. For families who have already endured wildfire evacuations in recent years, the sound of heavy rain on the roof triggers anxiety. For elderly residents living alone, each power outage feels longer than the last. For children, canceled school days may seem fun at first, but prolonged disruptions strain routines and stability. Storm fatigue sets in, and yet the atmosphere shows little sign of calming. Forecast models suggest additional Pacific systems are organizing offshore. If they follow the same trajectory, California could see more heavy rainfall. If cold air remains entrenched across central and eastern states, the collision zone for snow and ice remains active. The next 2 weeks could determine whether this becomes one of the most expensive winter disasters in recent history. Emergency managers are preparing contingency plans. Reservoir levels are being monitored hour by hour. Snowpack measurements are taken daily because when the snow eventually melts, especially if a warm system follows, flooding risk could surge again. The question is no longer just how bad this storm cycle is, it's how long it will last, and whether infrastructure built for the past can withstand the volatility of the present. This winter is revealing vulnerabilities in levees, in power grids, in housing systems, in emergency response capacity. But it's also revealing strength, because across every affected state, people are adapting, learning, preparing better, upgrading forecasting tools, reinforcing buildings, reevaluating risk maps. The story of this winter isn't just about destruction. It's about transition, a shift toward more extreme contrasts, heavier precipitation, sharper cold snaps, more rapid swings between drought and flood. And as communities rebuild yet again, the conversation grows louder. How do we prepare for a future where these extremes are no longer rare? The storms have not finished writing their story. Even as floodwaters begin to recede in some parts of California, even as snowplows clear highways in the Midwest, even as power slowly returns to darkened neighborhoods, meteorologists are still watching the Pacific, because the atmosphere rarely shifts instantly. It transitions, and right now, the pattern that fueled this winter crisis is still active. Satellite imagery shows additional disturbances forming over open ocean waters. Not all of them will become major atmospheric rivers, but the ingredients remain present. Moisture is available. The jet stream remains unstable. Arctic air still lingers across large portions of the central and eastern United States. And when those elements align, history has shown what can happen. So what comes next? Short term, forecasters are monitoring three critical factors. First, Pacific moisture flow. If ocean temperatures remain slightly above average, storms tapping into that moisture could maintain high intensity. Even moderate systems following saturated ground can cause renewed flooding in California's most vulnerable regions. Second, jet stream behavior. If the jet stream remains dipped southward, it will continue acting like a highway, steering storm systems directly into the western United States while allowing Arctic air to spill downward into the Midwest and East. Third, temperature swings. Perhaps the most dangerous phase of winter storms isn't always during peak snowfall, but during rapid warming afterward. If heavy snowpack melts too quickly, rivers can surge again. Ice jams can form. Infrastructure weakened by freezing conditions can fail during thaw cycles. This means the next 2 to 3 weeks are critical. In California, water managers are walking a tightrope. Reservoirs that were dangerously low during years of drought have filled dramatically. That's good news long term, but releasing too much water too quickly risks downstream flooding. Holding too much increases structural pressure. Every decision is calculated. Meanwhile, mountain communities remain cautious. Snow may look beautiful, but when it accumulates rapidly, it creates avalanche risk in backcountry areas. Officials are urging hikers and skiers to monitor advisories carefully. Across the Midwest, cities are preparing for continued cold waves. Even brief reinforcements of Arctic air can refreeze melted surfaces, creating black ice hazards again. Road crews stand ready. Utility companies are reinforcing grid monitoring operations. But beyond immediate forecasts, something larger is happening. This winter is forcing conversations about infrastructure, about climate volatility, about preparedness in an era of extremes. For decades, many cities planned based on historical averages. Flood zones were mapped according to past patterns. Building codes reflected old snow load records. Power grids were engineered for expected seasonal peaks. But the last several years have challenged those assumptions. Drought followed by deluge, wildfire followed by mudslide, mild winters interrupted by sudden polar outbreaks. The margin for error is shrinking, and so adaptation becomes essential. In California, some communities are investing in upgraded drainage systems and expanded flood channels. Others are re-evaluating hillside development policies in areas prone to slides. Insurance markets are adjusting, sometimes painfully, to reflect higher risk. In colder states, cities are modernizing salt storage, snow removal fleets, and emergency shelter capacity. Technology is improving too. Forecasting models are becoming more precise. Satellite data is updated faster than ever. Early warning alerts reach smartphones instantly. Social media spreads advisories in seconds. But preparedness is not just institutional. It's personal. For families watching this unfold, experts recommend several key actions during prolonged winter patterns. Keep emergency supplies stocked: water, non-perishable food, flashlights, batteries, blankets. Avoid unnecessary travel during severe advisories. Prepare vehicles with winter kits, including jumper cables, traction aids, and emergency heat sources. Check on elderly neighbors and vulnerable community members during extreme cold. Monitor local weather updates daily, not weekly. Patterns are evolving quickly, and perhaps most importantly, respect the warnings. Many winter-related fatalities occur when people underestimate conditions. A short drive during freezing rain, a walk outside without proper protection, a generator used improperly indoors. Small decisions can carry enormous consequences during extreme weather. But amid caution, there is also cautious optimism. Long-term precipitation from atmospheric rivers, if managed properly, can replenish aquifers and reduce drought severity. Healthy snowpack in the Sierra Nevada can secure water supply through summer months. Not every storm outcome is negative. The challenge lies in balance. Too little water starves the land. Too much overwhelms it. And the United States now finds itself navigating that balance more frequently. As climate patterns shift and oceans warm incrementally over time, scientists suggest we may continue seeing intensified precipitation events paired with sharper temperature contrasts. Not constant chaos, but higher peaks, deeper troughs, more dramatic swings, which means resilience must rise alongside intensity. Communities that adapt quickly, reinforcing levees, modernizing grids, improving emergency communication, will fare better in future cycles. Individuals who stay informed and prepared will reduce personal risk dramatically, and policymakers will face increasing pressure to invest not just in recovery, but in prevention. Because recovery is expensive, prevention is strategic. So as the clouds begin to thin in some areas and fresh systems gather offshore, America stands in a moment of reflection. This winter has tested transportation networks, energy infrastructure, emergency response systems, and personal endurance, but it has also highlighted something powerful. When faced with extremes, communities unite. Volunteers show up. First responders push beyond exhaustion. Neighbors share warmth, literally and figuratively. And that resilience may be the most important takeaway of all. The sky may turn dark again. The Pacific may send another river of moisture. Arctic air may surge once more. But knowledge, preparation, and collective response grow stronger each time SOS forecasts update and radar screens refresh. One truth remains. Weather is powerful, but preparation is power too. Stay alert, stay ready, and remember, the story of this winter is still unfolding.